The difference between the hobbyist and what I would call the professional, the individual who is trying to get their work published, who's trying to perhaps make something of a career, an income out of their work. When it comes to writing, the difference is simply in the outcome expectations. If you are a writer who's trying to take something serious, who's trying to be a professional in some context, the execution and the outcome is what matters. That is the primary difference. The hobbyist can sort of, take their time, go around, make mistakes, fix them, and not have to ever worry about execution. They can dabble, they can do every wrong thing imaginable. And as long as they're just enjoying their time, well, that's awesome, right? That's the luxury of the hobbyist. The person who takes it seriously, when I say seriously, again, I'm talking about the professional here. The professional, what matters is the outcome, the execution. And the quality of your work determines the degree of that execution. If you're someone who is really good at starting a project, who just shows up every day writing and you can put out an okay thing at the beginning. You can do a good first draft, but you cannot edit properly. You don't know how to fix your structural issues. You don't really understand the context of how a story narrative needs to be told. You don't understand, kind of a certain, not just the tropes basically, but if you don't understand certain arcs and certain archetypes that you've seen, you're never going to make that progress. You're never going to be able to make that jump. You're not going to be able to execute because you don't have a product that people are going to be willing to basically buy. You don't have a story that people are interested in, unfortunately. Same thing with on the more line edit stuff. If you don't know how to line edit, if you don't understand how to make corrections to your tale, how to address certain mistakes, that's going to basically sink your project because you're never going to get acquired. No one's going to pick up your story if it's not, written with a sufficient degree of prose. And so as I go through this, it's important to remember that, obviously for myself, just as much as it is for kind of the message that I'm conveying to everyone else, the idea that you need to constantly be aware of this. You need to constantly be reevaluating what you're doing and seeing if you're getting results. If you're getting, rejection after rejection, that's obviously fine in the beginning. It's necessary. But with those rejections, why? Why are you getting them? Is it, can you identify a reason? Oftentimes you're not told it. I mentioned before that, oftentimes in this process, no one tells you why you get rejected. You just do. And sometimes, it's a very obvious thing that maybe your story just simply was not of a good enough quality. Other times it's subjective. It's what you submitted. There's no market for it. It's hard to tell what you're doing is wrong, but you need to try and figure that out. You need to recognize what you're doing and why it's not working and be able to correct that. That's simply, the nature of being someone who executes, someone who gets in there and gets things done. So, if you are trying to become a professional, and if you're going after that lofty aspiration of trying to, make some sort of income from your work, this is not just some side hobby. Start looking at your results, start trying to figure out what you're doing wrong and try to correct it. It's very, very simple, very basic, very foundational, but when it comes to writing, it's absolutely very difficult in practice. It's hard just to recognize and then to make those corrections. Once you do recognize it, the way to fix it usually is by reading the works of other authors who have mastered your area of weakness. If your dialogue tends to be very weak, read the works of other people who do great dialogue. Watch really classic films. In all honesty, I like the golden age of Hollywood. Honestly, had some of the best dialogue I've ever heard. Just really, really engaging. And you'll notice, again, this is going down kind of a side tangent basically, but you'll notice too certain things about, just as an example, dialogue. You'll notice that it doesn't always need to sound realistic. It doesn't always have to, be as filled with like kind of the minutia of day-to-day life like our regular conversations have. What you'll notice is it's very to the point. It's very much sort of a verbal war in many respects when people engage in dialogue. They're stating opinions and you're gaining their character, but they're also being stated in a way that is often a form of confrontation. It's often a form of headbutting with how dialogue is presented, because you're basically showing these characters and how they stand in opposition to other people. Again, you have to recognize it though, and you have to be willing to do that work. And that, again, that's just one example is dialogue. Plenty of other examples of people's weak writing. And if your work is just overall weak, or overall just needs improvement without any one particular area, you got to read more. And not just read, but learn how to analyze. The best technique to just improve in general, the one thing I tell people all the time, like just in general to improve your work, just to get better at it, is copy work. Just start copying down what other writers have done. Make it your daily exercise. Take a short story or some smaller piece of work that you really enjoy. Copy down 1 to 2 pages a day. Like before you start working on your own project, do that. You'll start to recognize how good writing looks by physically typing it out. What you do is you look on the screen and you see in your word processor that you basically will see in your word processor exactly how great writing appears. That is very, very different from reading it in a book. From looking at it on a page to seeing it in a word processor blinking at you with a cursor. You can actually analyze the length of sentences, the structure. You can compare your work. You can actually copy a page of your work, put it side by side, or page, basically in like a split window, side by side, look at it and realize, all right, why does mine not look like that? Why does mine just structurally not look like that? Not even getting into the individual word choice, basically the individual, start getting into more the minute things, but just the structure. Why does this section tend to have this sort of paragraph structure? Why does mine not have that? What's it missing here? Why, how many lines of description are there? How many, lines of dialogue? How is the dialogue and description and the movement and the action between the description? How is that sort of interwoven? It's very, very easy in comparison to reading it when you type it out. The problem is it's very boring. If you're going to go through and do copy work, it's going to be very, very boring. I think I'm one of the few people who kind of enjoys it a little bit. Most people do not. So, but that is a very, very good way to get better at it. But again, it comes back to having that feedback mechanism of recognizing where your weaknesses are and then figuring out how to correct them. That's all this process. That's all the process of improvement is just simply recognizing where the weaknesses are and then figuring out what to correct it and then actually executing on that correction. That is how you execute. That is how you put out better work than before, which is what you need to do if you're going to take this seriously. But that's going to be it for today. I hope that concept sort of sticks with you there. And it's kind of funny. In most areas of life outside of this, in my day jobs, in other areas of my life, I'm not always the most efficient executor, right? I'm not always the guy who gets the most done or gets, necessarily the most efficiently processed work. I'm not the person, who closes every single deal or closes the most deals. I'm often the guy who's, kind of runs middle of the pack there. But when it comes to writing, when it comes to this area, I execute. This is the one area where my life where I am very, very efficient in many respects, I tend to do quite well at, is when it comes to writing. That is where I get things done. All right. So I will be back tomorrow, though. Until then, happy writing.